Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight. I am so excited about this panel. We were visiting a few minutes before we got started, and you guys are in for a treat. We have Jen Toronto and all her writing about the different people in New York and in the East Coast where we're doing, well, like the Bleecher Streets and other ones. And we also have Laura Franz, who talks about the Revolutionary War era. We have Jennifer Dybel, who actually brings us to Ireland, which, you know, who doesn't want to go to Ireland? And of course, we have Roseanne White, who has brought us all over the world. So we have a lot to talk about. We are looking forward to your questions. So have them come on in and we'll get them mentioned. So hi, ladies. How's everybody doing? Well, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
So we're going to get started. I was telling the ladies, so I will tell our attendees too, that last time I did very miserable about making sure I asked different ones first. I'm going to give it a good shot to get it better. So, so we'll just try to work our way around the circle. If you feel like I'm picking on you too much, just let me know. So Jennifer, tell us a little bit about your new book, The Lady at Galloway Manor. And if I said that right.
Yes, I think you did.
Good.
I'm so excited about this story, The Lady of Galway Manor. It's my sophomore release. And this story really gripped me from the first kind of spark of I wonder what would happen if kind of came into my mind. This story follows Annabeth de Lacy, who is the daughter of a British landlord, and he has been sent to County Galway in Ireland in 1920 to be the new landlord. And Annabeth is the oldest of two girls. And so her father kind of goes back and forth between treating her like a proper lady of the court and sometimes treating her like the son he never had. And so a lot of times he will end up allowing her to do things that wouldn't always be considered proper for a lady. And especially in Ireland, living in a rural area without all the social structure of the court, she finds herself very bored, and she has an eye for design, and she hears about the Claddagh ring. And so she bugs her dad until he finally gives in to set up an apprenticeship for her at the jewelry shop where the ancestors of the man who designed the Claddagh design run a jewelry store. And if you're not familiar with the Claddagh design, it ended up being something that I actually had seen it a lot throughout my life, but I had no idea what it was. And so typically it's a ring, but you see it on all sorts of things. There's a heart, and then there's hands on either side of the heart and a crown on top. So she is set up with this apprenticeship, and she has sort of been taught her whole life that the Irish are these barbaric, almost subhuman people that need to be taught God's ways and sort of saved from themselves. And so Annabeth is very excited. She thinks she can help them, and she kind of is coming in thinking of herself as God's gift to the Irish. Meanwhile, Stephen, who is the man she's been apprenticed to, is bitter and jaded in just about every possible way. He's been burned by love. He no longer believes in it. And now, after spending every single day of his life in the shop peddling this lie, having to sell these rings to all these googly-eyed people in love, supposedly, he's kind of had enough. So he's trying to find a way out when his father springs this on him that he is supposed to now apprentice this woman, this British woman, no less. And so it's their plight to sort of figure out what on earth is happening and who are these people actually, and sort of having to examine those beliefs that they've held for their whole lives.
Awesome. And I was telling some librarians this morning with your books, I love the settings. You have a way of writing them like I feel like I'm there. I've never been to Ireland, but I feel like I've been to Ireland because of your writing. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. So we're going to confuse the Jens. So Jen, what's your new book, The Disguise the Truth?
Okay, so hi everyone, Jen Toronto here, coming to you from Colorado. I would normally be coming to you from my garden shed that a lot of people know that I write out of, but it snowed. So, and my Wi-Fi down there is a little questionable. And I didn't want my face to be frozen the whole time. So this is my other office. Sorry, I know people wanted to see my shed, but it's a little cold out there. But this is the book, To Disguise the Truth. It is the third and final book in the Bleecker Street Inquiry Agency. But you don't have to actually read the other two to understand what's going on, because I write my books as standalones, but I'm going to show them to you since I remembered to pull them out. So the first book is To Steal a Heart. Gabriella Goodhue. It's been a while. And then the second book is To Right a Wrong, Miss Daphne Beekman. Yes, I did look again. She's the one who's the most like me because she is a writer. So some of her little quirks are mine. And then the final one, this is Eunice Holbrook. And so I first got the idea from her. I'm a linear writer, so I see my books unfold like a movie in my head, and it goes from like A to Z. I can't write, a scene. It has to just go from start to finish. That's how I do it. And so she showed up when I was writing the first book, and all I saw was a woman in widow's weeds. And I really had no idea what her story was. And then it's just, she took on a life of her own. And so this book probably has more mystery than any of my other books that I've written. And she was, what, it was so, the mystery was so complicated, and it was in the heat of COVID too. So my brain was a little like, and I was in a garden shed, and it was winter and it was cold out there. So there was a point in this book that it was, I had a plot board behind me, and I was setting it up, and it was just a hot mess. And so at one point in this particular book, everyone, I killed everyone off, and I wrote, nobody gets a happily ever ending. And I just closed up my laptop and I stormed through, it was a snowstorm, back up to our house. And I said, I'm never writing again. I'm going back to fashion, because that's what I used to do before my second career. And, but I eventually, I pulled out the vacuum, because that's what I do. So I did a lot of vacuuming with this one. And as I was vacuuming, the entire story that I should have written in the first place sprang to mind. So, and I got a letter, it always happens. I got a letter from a reader the very next day telling me, please don't stop writing. We need humor in COVID times. And I was like, oh, really? So I went back to the shed and I rewrote this book in 2 months, and it turned out to be the story I was supposed to write. So I'll show it to you again to disguise the truth. Eunice's story. But
Awesome.
so it's the conclusion to the Bleecker Street Inquiry Agency. And it was the hardest book I ever had to write.
Isn't that interesting? And I love the mystery of it. In any of your books, your humor is amazing. Because my husband every once in a while is looking at me like, what are you reading? Because I'm laughing out loud. And that's a great story. So
Well, I'd like to hear that. Good.
And
People either laugh or they think I've lost my mind. There's like no middle ground with the Jen Toronto book.
no, but that's what makes them fun. So, so Laura, your new one, A Heart Adrift.
Yes, A Heart Adrift's been out there a month. It's hard to believe it, a little over a month. And I'm traveling, so forgive the cavity backdrop here. It's kind of foreign. But Chris, can you point to my cover there? I don't have my book with me.
Oh, well,
and this is one of my favorite covers. So we're up to 13 covers. And I think the new cover designer, Laura Kleinster, I think her name is, she's just knocked it out of the park. Not everybody likes the cover, I'm sure, but I think most people love this cover. It's a sophisticated cover, it's romantic, and I think it captures the 18th century mood very well. So what is A Heart Adrift about? It's a story set in colonial America. It opens in 1755 in Virginia at the start of the French and Indian War, which was a very tumultuous time period for France, England, and the colonies, and Canada. So I paired a privateering sea captain hero with a chocolatier heroine. Kind of stoked my love of chocolate there. I've always wanted to do something like that. She's a foodie like me. Well, anyway, it's a second chance romance, and you can expect some historical fireworks, romance, intrigue. There's even a pandemic. It's just, and a lot of, issues that kind of reflect our times right now. It was a very personal story to me. I wrote it after, during, I lost my best friend to COVID unexpectedly. And so the dedication is to dear Ginger. And she keeps inspiring me, even though she's no longer here. And I said, I hope heaven has a big library because I know she's in it. But anyway, there's a Heart Adrift for you, short and sweet and snappy. And I wish I had some of Jen's humor. I'd love to insert that in my books. They get a little dark sometimes.
And, we need a little bit of everything, we can't always have just silliness either. That came out wrong, Jen. Your books are not silly. Sorry. But, you need the humor, but you also need the seriousness. There, now I sounded proper. Oh boy. But I have to tell you, Laura, your books have taught me a lot about that colonial America. I mean, you study it in history and you're like, but everybody was like a revolutionary, wasn't that right? And yet they weren't. They were chocolatiers and they were, well, a pirate, but, privateer, so it gives a humanness to our American history. So I like that. So, and while you had mentioned it, Baker Publishing in general, covers have been fantastic. I mean, all 4 of these are just beautiful. So they are knocking it out of the park. I agree completely, Laura. So Rosanna, sorry, I do that to you every time, and I'm sorry. But a treasure of an heiress. There we go. Oh boy.
All right, to Treasure and Heiress, I did not grab my copy to put it up, so you'll have to do that for me too. I have no excuse. I'm not traveling. I'm just forgetful. But To Treasure and Heiress is the second book in the Secrets of the Isles series. Oh, my husband special delivered.
What a good man.
He's really awesome. So the Secrets of the Isles takes place on the Isles of Scilly, which are 24 miles off the coast of Cornwall. So it's the southernmost part of England, and they have a subtropical climate. So they're actually warmer than all of Europe, which is why they have beautiful scenery. And it's this little getaway that I'd love to get away to, and COVID, can't. But anyway, so the premise for the series, I was kind of just burned out with all the war books I'd been writing for years. So I was like, I need something fun. So I decided to set up this series that they're on a treasure hunt. They're searching for pirate treasure. So this is in 1906, and all 3 books in the series are actually set during the summer of 1906. And we're just following some friends as they're hunting pirate treasure, because the Isles of Scilly were a huge kind of den of pirates back in the 1600s, because it was right on the trade route. So especially during the English Civil War in the 1640s, that's where the outcast monarchy had gone in exile. So anyone loyal to the crown went to the Scillies and then became pirates so that they could feed themselves. So great fun. So this second book in the series is about Elizabeth Tremaine, who goes by Beth. She was missing in book 1, and that's what kind of started this whole thing. But she's back in book 2, and she is a little miffed that her treasure hunt became our treasure hunt, and has to kind of learn how to let go of all that. And also she's just very annoyed that this Lord Sheridan, who started this whole thing by sticking his nose in where it didn't belong, is now a guest in her house, and she just can't get rid of him. And so they're at loggerheads there, but he takes one look at her and swears she's the most beautiful woman in the world and is head over heels in love. So Sheridan is, I'm no Jen Toronto, but Sheridan is my most humorous character I've ever written, and I had great fun writing him. So I wrote this book though in 2 very distinct halves. I wrote the first half on a writing retreat with my best friend, and it was great and it was fun. And I came home ready to get back to it. And then 4 days later, my son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and we spent 5 days in the hospital. That interrupted the writing a little bit. It took me months to get back to it. Thankfully, I had those months. So then I finished the second half, and all came together. Editorial team didn't tear it to too many shreds, only a couple shreds. And so there we are, book 2, and tons of fun. We do have a pirate prince in this one as well from the 1600s. So how often can you say that, right?
Right, exactly.
I have to put in a plug for Jen. I saw your new cover today. Oh my word. I can't wait till you share it with all of us off your newsletter. I'm a new newsletter person, so you have an awesome newsletter. So I just want to say great cover next time. Yeah.
Awesome. Roseanne, somebody did ask, how is your son doing? They had seen it in the dedication or the
He's
afterward.
doing fabulous. He's sitting in there with my husband right now building a computer. So probably scowling at me like, why do you have to talk about this? I'm fine. So
I don't know why anybody mentions it. Yeah.
yep. No, he's a real champ about it all.
Awesome. Awesome. And somebody, Jen, somebody wants to know if you had a favorite character to write in this new book.
Me?
Yep.
Favorite character to write in this new book. You know, yes, oh dear. I'm like 2 books ahead of this one, so I have to like kind of like brush up on what this book is about. But you know, I actually really liked Arthur Livingston because he is the hero in the book, and he was just such a great match for Eunice, who's a very strong woman. Apparently, I mean, she's got secrets. Again, the Black. And he just didn't let her walk all over him, which is the kind of woman she is. She would definitely walk all over him. And I mean, when she ended up going to the Blackwell Island insane asylum to get away from him, because she actually shot Arthur a few years back. That's how the book opens up. He's sitting across from her. She's got her widow's weeds on, so he can't see her face. But yes, she shot this man, and this is going to be a problem because he's found her now. So to get away from him, she goes to the this insane asylum. And I was actually going to write a bigger part with that. But one of my friends came out with a book that was centered at Blackwell's. And you know what? That's just not cool. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I couldn't do it then, but I still had all this research. So I did fit in a chapter, but it was really fun when he goes to the asylum and just how that all unfolded. And they kind of, you know, realize what's going on, or he realizes who she could be. That could be a spoiler alert, so I'm just not going to say anything else. I hope that answered your question.
It did. Lovely. Thank you.
Okay.
And of course, you know, you go to insane asylums to get away from people. I will put that down as necessary information.
Yes,
You shot them.
Well, she did shoot him, and then she's not, so she is the one who formed the Bleecker Street Inquiry Agency in the first book. But she doesn't do field work hardly at all, except there was one incident in one of the books that she helped return a missing poodle. But that was really, did not equip her to be capable of, like, you know, going undercover in an insane asylum. So that was just very amusing to write, you know, to place her there. And it's a very dark place to go. So it was kind of tricky to add humor into that scene. But I think I did okay. It's not all dark and, you know, and horrendous. I mean, there's some darkness there, but, you know, I mean, dark for me, not dark like, you know, most people write, but can't really get away with that.
So, and actually, I like this question. So Jennifer, I'm going to ask you next. Do you have a favorite character in The Lady of Galloway?
I do. At first I would have said it was Stephen, the hero, because he's brooding and he's got that like angry guy thing going on. But that's just a shield. That's not who he really is. But if I'm really honest with myself, I would have to say Seamus Jennings is my favorite. He is Stephen's father, and he's this quirky, quintessential old Irishman that is goofy and silly and fun-loving, but he has lived through all of the same pain that his son has lived through, and he's had to watch his son endure heartbreak after heartbreak. So, but it was kind of that, you know, the boiling water hardens the egg but softens the potato kind of a thing. And Seamus is just a little fluffy potato. I love him to death.
And I agree with that. You're right. I might not have said that at first, but as soon as you said it, it was like, yep, that was him. He was a lot of fun to read. So, Roseanne, do you have one? And, you know, to be honest with you, I picked on you guys with this new book, so we should probably stay in the new book. So.
I was assuming that's what you meant. So
Okay.
I would say Sheridan was my favorite in this because he was just so much fun to write. Like, he was just very self-deprecating, even though he's, a pretty high-ranking lord, and everything he thinks comes out in some like discombobulated way. And to try to think, how did he get to be this way? Well, that was one of the fun things to realize. It's because he has sisters who are interrupting him constantly. He just started interrupting himself constantly. So he was a ton of fun, and I think I wrote most of the book with a smile on my face, just going, what's he going to say next? So it was great. Yeah.
I will say, I have to appreciate that, like you said, he had sisters, so he never got in a complete sentence. And he didn't know how to speak in complete sentences for that reason. And I know a couple of boys that have all sisters, and they do talk that way, by the way. And Laura, who was your favorite character?
In A Heart Adrift,
Yeah.
I had to think about that because you're kind of like, your children, your books and all your characters, you hate to pull one out, but it would be the one I liked the most was Eliza, who was quite a departure for me to write. I would never dare make Eliza a main character because she's too outrageous. She's too out there. I mean, she wears that shipwreck of a hairstyle at the beginning of the novel. She will do and say anything. And she taught me a lot during the novel. She was kind of the humor that was needed in a somewhat dark novel. And she makes a wonderful finish in the novel. No spoilers for those who haven't read it, but that was my favorite part, was her, her finale, or the grand finale. But she taught me a lot in the novel about how we can be adrift spiritually. And she, is the embodiment of the flesh, and her sister is more the spirit, my heroine. So it was an interesting dichotomy there. And I love when characters teach you something. Sometimes we think, well, we write these books and, the God gives us with words, and, who does he want to bless? It lands in readers' hands. We pray that happens. But sometimes it's as much for us as the readers who pick up the book. We're convicted and changed and challenged as we write these stories we write. So Eliza, give a huzzah for Eliza.
That's a good way to put it. And she was that type of character that she would be right along with you on that. So
real annoying in many respects, but lovable too.
Yeah, it took a little while to warm up to her, but once she got there, it was like, she would have been your best friend forever.
Yes,
So,
she's faithful, loyal.
Yes, very much so. So, okay, we've been talking about the genres or the eras. I'm going to say eras because right now we're going to stay in the historical romance stuff. But if there was a romance or an era that you haven't written in, what would you like to write in instead of what you've been writing in? Not that we don't enjoy that. That's awesome. But, if you could just dream and say, oh, I'd like to write in the caveman era. Which if you want to do, I'd be very interested to see. But Laura, let's start with you.
Oh, I would love to jump back a few centuries and write a medieval novel.
Really?
A lot of it, I've been, for the Scotland novel that's coming up next, No Coming to America, and this one like in About Heart, but I've been unearthing all my family history in Scotland because we were exiled, my ancestors, to Virginia colony because they, basically fought against the king and he booted them. But anyway, I've been unearthing that history and I've found this treasure trove of medieval history that all my Humes and Scottish ancestors played out. And it's just so fascinating. It belongs in a book, not just some genealogical chart, but I don't think I can probably leave the 18th century and jump to the medieval period. I'm not sure how many readers like that. What do you say, readers?
Yeah, I don't know. You know what, readers out there, you send emails to Laura and let her know how many of you would read a medieval century book. So you might be surprised. So it strikes me as interesting too. So Rosanna, now you have written in a couple different eras, give or take a few here. So one you haven't written in that you would like to try.
Gosh, I have written in a lot more than are published too, because I have a lot of unpublished manuscripts sitting there. So there aren't a ton that I really want to try that I haven't. I do, like, if I were to depart genre, I have an idea for a kind of historical-esque fantasy that's inspired by ancient Greece. So if I were to do a total departure, it would be that. It would be a strange mashup of actually set in the future, but very like historical Greek society sort of thing. Yeah. So
There you
to
go.
totally go off the wall.
Okay, of all the answers I thought I would get from Eddie, but that would not have been one of them. So thank you for surprising me.
You're so welcome.
Oh, that was my fault. Sorry about that. Jennifer, how about you?
So my first two books are both set in 1920. Book 3, that Lord willing will come out next February. We moved it. We're getting wild and crazy and hitting up 1935. I think I would either want to throw it way back, like pre-medieval, get that like tribal aspect of Ireland if I was going to stay there, or I would love to do like a contemporary like rom-com kind of thing just to see. I don't know how great I would be at the com part, but I think it would be fun to try.
Well, let me introduce you to Jen, and you two can.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. So Jen, what would you write in differently? Because you.
Well, when I first was trying to break into the business, I wrote a ton of different genres. I started off writing a middle grade book with my son, then I went to young adult, then I did women's fiction, then I did something in between there. And then I landed on historical romance because really that's what I read the most. And they always say you should write what you know. And so, but I wrote Regency when I first started out. But then I read this book on Alva Vanderbilt and I fell in love with the Gilded Age. And I said, you know what, now I'm gonna write a Gilded Age book. And that turned out to be A Change of Fortune, which was the first book that I published. But if I had to write one, now I actually have written one of these, and we don't need to talk about my contemporary Finding Margot, but I would go contemporary because I have this idea and I can see it in my head. And it starts off with a woman who is running across, she's at a masquerade ball and she's running across in this beautiful gown. And that normally this would seem like a scene right out of the romance novels that she enjoys reading because she's a librarian, but someone is chasing her with a gun she's pretty certain is Rio, and she's pretty certain he wants to murder her. So that's what I want to write. I am gonna fit in my schedule to write a contemporary. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, great. Well, I personally am looking forward to each one of those, so get busy. So no, that is awesome. I love that is so different than what any of you write now.
Mhm.
That, you know, it shows you guys' talent. So I have a question here, and we will kind of wander around through this, but I'm going to read the question and then we'll kind of go from there. What would you consider the big, and they say wowza, historical fact you found while doing a research for any of your books, and did it make it into any of your books? So I don't even know where we've started. Roseanne, why don't you go ahead and start? See, now you know why I do this terrible. I forget who I asked first all the time. So.
Well, let's see. There's been so many fun things, but usually like I'm going and looking for them for things to include. So it's not like big surprises, but something that really surprised me was when I was writing Love Finds You in Annapolis, which is now A Heart's Revolution. I went looking just for like this one small tidbit to round out a scene and happened across this information saying that this winter was the worst winter in history up until then. And that, you know, the entire Eastern seaboard was covered in snow the whole winter. And I'm going, what? I was like 3/4 of the way done writing this book and it was a mild winter like we usually have in Annapolis. So I had to go back and redo the whole thing because there had been an eruption of a volcano in Iceland that covered the entire northern hemisphere in a little 1-year ice age. And I was like, oh, that's good to know. So
Oops.
yeah, oops.
Well, it's a little snow between friends. So. So Jennifer, how about you? What is one of the most wowza facts you have ever found in your research?
Oh goodness. Well, the first one that came to mind is actually going into book 3, and I'm not sure I'm ready to spill that one yet.
Okay.
So
We won't tell anybody, it's just, amongst
let me
us here.
think. I don't know that it was Wowza, but one that really just kind of took my breath away was the depth of the tradition surrounding the Irish funeral. Because I was playing with an idea for a dance in Donegal, and I wanted to see, what would it have been like if this thing happened that I was planning on happening, and just the so many layers, and it was like this well choreographed dance. It almost reminded me of the way they did it in biblical times, where everyone had kind of an assigned part, and there were very specific things that you say, and you say them at certain times. And even when a woman is allowed to cry vocally, it's like she can't do it before a certain time, otherwise they felt like it was bad luck or whatever. And so just the richness, and that no second was wasted, it all had meaning to it. And that was really meaningful to me, just because we had been through ourselves quite a bit of trauma throughout that time, and we had lost my father-in-law. And so just learning that it's okay to walk through that grief with purpose. So yeah, and it may or may not have made it into that book. I don't want to spoil anything.
Yeah, okay, I don't want to spoil anything either, but yes. Well, I don't want to give anything away because people haven't read it, but it really was a beautiful scene. I did not realize that wasn't something that you weren't making up, that it was actually, those were actual traditions. Yeah, that really, to be honest with you, fleshed that scene out so much. It was just very, yeah. So thank you for sharing that. I truly had no idea that wasn't something like you just kind of embellished, so to speak. So that's really cool. So how about you, Jen? I'm almost afraid to ask this question.
I have a lot, but the one I think that took me aback the most revolves around Gladys Deacon. And Gladys Deacon was this beautiful, beautiful woman in the Gilded Age. And she had the hots for the Duke of Marlborough. Unfortunately, he was still married to Consuela Vanderbilt, right? But they had an acrimonious marriage. Well, she set out to win him over. And and she did once he got divorced. But she was so beautiful that she was known to just stare at her reflection in the mirror for hours on end. Well, she noticed she had a bit of a dent right here. She was not perfect. So this is right at the turn of the century, like I want to say it was 1902, 1903. So she goes in and she wants them to fix the dents in her head. So in 1902, 1903, they injected paraffin into her forehead. The stuff that you use to do your skis with, wax your skis with. Well, they put that in her forehead. And for like a brief period of time, it's out, the dent is gone. But it started to melt underneath the skin, and it melted, and it traveled all the way down her nose. And then it started going down here, and then it settled into her chin. So if you Google pictures of Gladys Deacon, there is a picture of her. She had to go finally have it surgically removed, marred her face forever. But could you imagine having paraffin melting on the inside of your face?
No.
I think that's the one that took me aback the most. I mean, I have a ton of other ones, but that one I was like,
I have to agree. That I got no words. I don't know what to say to that one. I think that might win the gold star forever. So
and it will show up. It will show up in a book somewhere, right? I'm just not up to. I've been going like every year, every series. It's a new year, right? So right now I'm up to 1888. So I need another, 10 series before I get up there. So.
Okay, we'll wait with bated breath for that.
Okay.
See where it shows up. Remember this, write this down. So we'll make note of it when it shows up. So Laura, how about you? I mean, you're dealing with pre-colonial America. There's got to be fascinating things.
Well, there is. I mean, if you want to get right down to it, I'll give you two quick wins. One is that there was no underwear worn in colonial America. There wasn't invented. Nobody wore underwear. So they also had horrible, yeah. They also were not very sanitary as far as, they didn't bathe. Some people didn't bathe their entire lifetime, if you can believe that. That's a wow. But for a sweet fact, you get in George Washington's armies, his troops carried chocolate. His officers did in their on their campaigns in their baggage, which I thought, it wasn't Hershey's, friends. It was colonial cocoa, but I thought that was a pretty sweet thing to find out.
Yeah.
Our chocolate history in America goes way back, and that's kind of fun.
Now, just because these things pop in my head, was there a reason behind it? Like, this was a reward they gave out or gave to themselves because they were good that day, or was it?
Chocolate, good question. And chocolate, I've seen it primarily for officers. It was pretty expensive. So I think it was probably almost an honor that they conferred. Here, we're going to give you some chocolate in your pack, maybe an incentive to sign on, who knows? But I found it fascinating, and I'm sure they would have, on the trail, they would be cold perhaps, or in need of something warm, and they could, put it in with some sugar and water or milk and have a wonderful hot chocolate drink, which was quite, George and Martha loved hot chocolate, and Ben Franklin sold cocoa out of his shop in like 1730s. So we go way back.
Isn't that fun? And, it's not surprising we love chocolate in America from, day one. So, but here is an interesting question, and this is for all of you. So some of you will have longer to think about it. Have any of you ever considered writing a children's book? Or maybe you did and you haven't had it published yet. So I think, Jennifer, we are starting with you this time. So.
Okay. Yes, actually I have. My grandparents, my mom's parents, were both very accomplished artists. And my grandmother had this beautiful, classy style. She had this very Audrey Hepburn vibe about her. And my grandpa was also very classy, but also had this like twinkle in his eye, almost like a Seamus kind of a vibe to him. And so I didn't know for a long time that he painted just like she did, but his art had a completely different feel and some whimsy to it that sometimes hers didn't have. And he had this painting of an elephant, this super wrinkly elephant with giant ears. And he's holding a daisy in his trunk with a little mouse at his feet. And I got this story idea for Edward the elephant, who is ostracized from the elephant community because he's not afraid of mice, and he befriends this mouse. And so they were going to go on all these adventures, and then my daughters were going to illustrate it for me because they have inherited the artistic gift from that side of the family, whereas I did not. So that's like our little family dream. I don't know if it'll ever come to fruition, but yeah. I would love to do that.
Well, I will read that one. Wrinkly elephants are fantastic.
Right?
So Jen, how about you? Ever think of writing a kid's book?
I have actually written two, clear back in the day. The first book I ever wrote, I wrote with my son. That's how I got involved with writing. He was in 3rd grade. We called it Fanglers. And it was like a fantasy world. He helped me. He's very bossy. And he went to school one day and just expected me to finish like an entire chapter book by the time I got home. But that's the book I wrote that I decided, you know what, I kind of liked using my brain again because I'd been a stay-at-home mom for so many years. And so I started looking into the publishing world. And while I was doing that, I wrote another one that I just love the name. There's a reason these books will never see the light of day. There's a reason some of our early work is not published because it's not publishing worthy. But I still like the name. It was called Mildred, Mystique, and the Curse of the Goblins. Yep. The best thing about it was the title. So yes, I have done that.
Okay, then we won't look for that one anytime soon.
No, don't look for that one anytime soon.
I agree. The title is actually fantastic.
Isn't it? I wanted a name for a girl she would absolutely just dread. And so I was at Dominic's elementary school and I'm like shaking down all of like the receptionists in the front office. And I'm like, I need some names. And they were used to me. I used to run the PTO, which is probably not surprising. Shake people down when I needed something, you know. It's like, here comes that crazy PTO lady, and so then somebody's like, oh, you have to name her Mildred. And I'm like, that'll work. And again, you know, but yeah, the story, I mean, it was a cute premise. It was. It's just my writing craft left so much to be desired, and it does sometimes take. And if anybody out there, when you're looking, if you're thinking about being a writer, sometimes you have to understand your early work, they're just your stepping stones to get you to where you need to be. So
that is great words there. Thank you, Jen, for adding that. So Laura, how about a kid's book set in the Revolutionary America?
Never.
Never?
I love them. In fact, my favorite resources sometimes are children's books about colonial period and YA especially. You know, those are the distilled facts. Sometimes those books have that are just, you get these little gems from them. So I have a whole collection of those, but I would never dare write one, not my skill set, but I admire them very much and collect them.
We admire your honesty. You know, no is a good answer. So. And Roseanne, how about you?
When my kids were little, I had a couple ideas for picture book type things, and my interest in them waned as my children got older and I stopped reading them constantly. So it's not something I really envisioned myself doing. I think if I did, it would be more of a, you know, chapter book, middle grade, maybe type of thing. But yeah, it's not, I think the more book, and I've read a ton of children's books, right? Like we homeschooled and we did a curriculum that involved reading out loud for 8 years. So I read a lot of kids' books. And what I learned was that they're hard to get right. And the truly phenomenal ones, of which there are many, just have this sparkle to them and this, you know, amazing depth in these short amount of pages. And anyone who has picked up one of my books knows that short is not my forte. So I'm going to say no.
Yeah, you're right. Short is not in your vocabulary, I think. But we personally are very thankful for that.
I am short,
you know,
but my words are not.
That's awesome. We will remember that. So well, there's a few more questions here. Actually, we have lots of time yet, so we will kind of keep just moving along here. One quick question somebody did have, Roseanne, your series, do you have to read them in order?
They are best read in order because there is a few lines that go throughout, but they are also each their own standalone romance. So I have readers pick them up out of order and they're not confused, but you'll just miss some of you have to get caught up on the mystery instead of knowing what's already going on.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I don't have questions for that. I can ask you if we need to read Rosanna's books in order, but that would be silly. So we won't do that. So you guys are all in the romantic historical genres. So in your writing, how do you balance the romance and the history? I mean, all four of you basically write really good half and half, if that makes sense, where you got a lot of the romance, but you have a lot of the history. So how do you make sure you keep that balance between the two, what I consider different genres? I mean, they really can be. So I have no idea where I'm supposed to go first next. So I'm really sorry. I need her to, my helper here, Becky, needs to say, it's so-and-so. Jen, we'll start with you. I don't know where we were. I'm really sorry.
Okay, that's fine. So how to keep it balanced? Well, I think most historical romance authors, you know, it's a hard thing with historical anyways, because you read all of these. I actually pulled some of the books, and like one of my favorite books for the Gilded Age is this one, Season of Splendor, and it's The Court of Mrs. Astor. Well, it's a really, really long book, you know, and I can read, 5 of these books just for one of my stories to get the flavor. But I'm only adding just that taste, like what their gown looks like, or they're walking into, Madison Square Garden, or they're going to the Metropolitan Opera, or they're going to the Knickerbocker Club, and then I'll give a brief description of that. But I don't start off with just that brief little bit of history. No, and I don't know if you guys do this or not, but I do like history dumps out of my first draft, and it'll be like 10 pages of what, the Metropolitan Opera looks like. And I'll get into the specifics about the jewelry the women are wearing and, where they shop. And I'll take you down the ladies' mile, and we will hit every store. And then I always come to my senses because I'm like, it's a romance, Jen, like cut it out. And when you've been doing it as long as I have, it's like you have those editors sitting on your shoulders all the time, like just saying like, that's an information dump, Jen, and I can hear them in my head. So I just go and delete. But for me, I just want to give the reader that taste of the time, of the era, of the extravagantness of the Gilded Age, because it really was extravagance. And there was so much conspicuous consumption, and and yet the people who did not have money. I mean, there was such a divide. So I want to give them a taste of that, but I can't allow myself, especially because I write romantic comedies. So I can't just immerse myself in all of the Gilded thing. I can just give little taste here and there, it is a struggle for me because I'm very, very wordy. Thank you, Rosanna. I can be incredibly wordy, and that editor gets on my shoulder again because I can just hear, I'm like, you need to cut that. But that's how I do it. It's like I have to get all of this out, and then I go back and I start chopping it so when I end up with a scene, it's just going to give you that taste so that you can kind of picture it in your head. I mean, that's what I hope. I hope readers can see what I see in my head. I hope that I can get that onto the paper well enough to where, you're seeing the same story I'm saying going on in my head. But, that's my biggest hope.
Awesome. How about you, Laura? How do you do that balance?
That Jen described it so well. I have a hard time. I love research as much as writing. So for me, you collect all these research books, you borrow them or whatever, however you get them. And I read a lot of dissertations online about things. That's one of my favorite ways to research. But it's beware the information dump. I try to just distill things down to a few fascinating facts, like Jen said, you gush maybe in the first draft or two, and then you have to start with that red pen or the delete button, and you just have to carve out so much or you're going to lose the reader. Excessive research slows the plot line down, and I'm finally learning that as I go, but I love it. I love those details. That's what makes the era, the century I write come alive. It's just so fascinating. It's like a foreign country to me, the colonial era. And so I'm just rabid to get all that stuff on the page, but you have to really pare back and just, get it down to some, like I said, fascinating facts. So the reader's entertained and not drowned.
And Rosanna, how do you do that? How's your process with that?
If it's a book that is very much driven by dates, like in the war books, things happened on certain dates, and I usually use those as a framework. And so I make sure, if I want to include the first real blitz of London during World War I, though it wasn't called that, well, I need to make sure that happens at an important part in my story. So I'll put that at the midpoint twist or at the climax or something like that. So I use that as my framework for my plot when it comes to the stuff I can't fudge when that happened, right? Like, it's fact. And Lincoln was assassinated on this date, in my Civil War book. That sort of thing it just becomes kind of my skeleton and my structure. But when it comes to the details, I tend to I'll read research before I get started, but then as I'm writing, I just pull in the facts that are like, what do I need right now? Like in this moment? Well, if, I need a sense. So they look around, what are they going to see? What are they going to hear? And that's when I'm constantly going to Google and saying things like, did they have doors or bells over the doors in colonial New York? These stupid little questions. But, those are the things that bring a scene to life and that, are the fun little tidbits. And, that's where you get to introduce your fashion and the food that they were eating and the smells that they'd be smelling. So I tend to just then treat it kind of like any other character, like as you interact with them, you learn about them. So
awesome. And Jennifer,
the romance part comes easily. That's fun part.
Well, that's good to know. You have a husband that brings you your book from off screen, so So Jennifer, what do you have to add? Which is, well, and that's a good, what is the easier part for you? Do you have, is one side easier or not?
I think it depends on the story, because the romance I just submitted book 3, and so I keep having to remind myself, no, I'm talking about Annabeth and Stephen, not these people over here. But like between Maura and Sean in my first book, their romance looked very different from Annabeth and Stephen's. And so I think just like anything else in life, the people, their personalities are going to shape things differently. And it's the same with the setting. I'm like Jen, I write my stories from start to finish. I can't go to like write the kissing scene and then build everything around that. I have to go start to finish in order. And it plays out in my head like a movie. And then I also think about those times, what stood out to me the first time I walked down Shop Street in Galway City, and and the colored bunting and the painted doors and what the air smelled like. And so those are, I imagine that's what Annabeth felt. And so you try to pull those things that would have been naturally noticeable and put that in there, so that setting does kind of become a character in itself, because you're experiencing it through their eyes. And so like, he's not going to know the name of the color of her dress. He's just going to know that it makes a lot of noise when she walks around and it's kind of annoying, those kind of things. So yeah, just whatever kind of feels natural and helps move that story forward. But I have the same problem. I find some fascinating tidbit and I write a whole chapter on it, and then they're like, well, that has nothing to do with the plot. So what are you going to do about that?
Leave it in. Somebody might like
really
it.
Important.
Right?
I agree. I want to know these things. Come on. So, well, you know what? We have a whole bunch of questions and we're running out of time, and it's like, read them faster. So this is a good one. And I think some of you have covered this a little bit, but it's interesting is, do you start with an idea or a character first, or does it depend on the story? I think, Laura, you're up first.
It does depend on the story. Usually all my novels are born by something fascinating that just grabs hold of me and won't let go in research, or just even casual reading. I read a lot of, historical biographies and things like that. So an idea will leap out at me. And like in the Valentine Legacy, the whole idea behind that 3-book series is, it started when I realized that blacksmiths often married apprentice blacksmiths, married into the master's family. They often married the oldest daughter. So that was the whole Valentine premise there. But each book is different. And then if I can nail down, I have that gem of an idea, then I go after character names. And I'm kind of relentless. You dive into, you can't use somebody named Destiny in a colonial novel. You have to be really careful about your name choices. And so then once I get a name, then I just kind of run with it. Seat of the pants, maybe run with it. And it just, like Jennifer said, it plays out in my mind like a movie. So you're working, but you're viewing too. You're just kind of writing down. That's amazing to me how that creativity plays out.
I am so with you on that. As somebody that, okay, I can write. I mean, I'm not that way, but to write a story and you guys make it where, you know, it's fun to read and interesting. That amazes me to no end. So, and as a reader, thank you for that. So what about you, Roseanne? Do you start with a character or an idea or both?
It's very similar to Laura's. It's usually a premise that is just nebulous until I can marry it to a person. So it's not really an idea until I figure out who could make this interesting thing take life. So, yeah.
Interesting. And Jennifer?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said any better than Rosanna. It's usually something that's like, huh, that's kind of cool. I didn't know that happened. Ooh, what if? And then you find, and the same with the names. I'm big on name meanings and it had to fit the time period. And so then I go on my little wild goose chase with that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's very much the same.
Awesome. How about you, Jen? What do you usually start with?
You know, I have a box that I just throw in ideas, and I get it normally from research. But the Bleecker Street Inquiry Agency came about because I was in New York City and I was in Bleecker Street, and there was this great little Italian bakery. Oh, the cannolis were to die for. So I have this cannoli, but it's pouring down rain too. So and I was with a tour guide who had this crazy man driving us around in this van, so I wasn't really that, like, I really didn't want to get back in that van, you know, so I was kind of lingering, and I walked out and I have my cannoli, it's pouring down rain, and I can see the Bleecker Street sign, and behind that there was this old building, and for some reason I was like, I bet you that used to be a boarding house. And from there it was like, and I could see, so then I start seeing shadowy figures in my brain. And I'm like, it was a boarding house. And you know what? I'm going to use that. And it's going to be a lady's going to own that. And she's got mysteries. Eunice owns the boarding house. And there's going to be other ladies who live there. And then they're all going to form an inquiry agency. And I don't know where the inquiry agency actually popped into my mind as I'm standing there with my cannoli, but I'm like, that'll work. And then I got back in that van. I was in fear for my life. That man was crazy. He was darting in and out of that traffic, but I barely got a picture of where the Otis elevator was on the tour. And I was like, stop the car. And he's like, I can't stop. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take your word for that. That's how when it's just life, you know, you just see things in life, and that's where I get ideas. So in that particular instance, it was the Bleecker Street Inquiry Agents, you know, the sign, the Bleecker Street, and then that building standing behind it. And I was like, oh, that'll work. So there you go.
Awesome. Okay, so we're wrapping up here, but there's going to be two-fold question here for you. First of all, if you want to share about what you're working on next or when it's releasing, feel free to just say, well, I'm working on something, I don't have a title or whatever, you know, if you don't want to give spoilers, that's fine. But also, where can we find your books besides bakerbookhouse.com? So, you know, do your own plug, you know, your websites and your social media. So I don't remember if I'm on Laura, I don't know, remember. You know what, go ahead, Laura. I said your name, you get to go first.
Well, my next novel releases next January, 2023, and it's a Scottish story. Like I said, no coming to America in this one, and it is I think cover art has begun, and we have a title. We have an official title now, but I'm kind of torn. You know, you readers chime in. Do I tell you the title, you know, in the next couple of weeks and share that, or do I just keep it under wraps till the cover reveal, maybe in May or June? I don't know what readers prefer, but I'm super excited about this novel and this cover. Awesome. And you can find me, you know, laurafrance.net on the web. My books are at pretty much all retailers, and I love Instagram. I hang out there probably the most, but I'm pretty active on my Facebook author page and try to connect with the air. I love readers, and wherever you find me, I respond. So thank you.
Awesome. And Roseanne?
All right. Well, next is, I guess actually in May, I have a standalone coming called Shadowed Loyalty, which is 1920s Chicago, just to mix things up a little bit. After that will be the final book in the Secrets of the Isles series, which is called Worthy of Legend. I just did cover reveal to newsletter subscribers today, and it'll be public on Thursday. So that one's fun. And then I'm just finishing up a book that will come between this series and my next series, which I'm calling it Yesterday's Tides. This is not official yet, but it's actually a time slip, World War I, World War II. So it combines all my worlds together. So that's a lot of fun.
Awesome. And you know what, you can add in if you have newsletters, if they can sign up on your website. I should have mentioned that earlier. So please feel free to do all the plugs you want to do. So don't shy. Jennifer, what are you working? I know you've been hinting at it, so we're all excited now, but what you got coming?
I'm so very excited. Book 3 takes us back to Donegal in 1935. We're a little ways down the road from Maura and Sean in this one. It's a standalone story, but it's sort of a play on a Cinderella story meets mystery meets Little Orphan Annie kind of vibe to it. I'm very, very excited about it. It's set to release in February of 2023. It does, as of this week, have an official title, and I am with Laura. I'm like, I don't know, because I'm afraid if I share it too early, then when it comes around, everyone will be like, oh yeah, no, that was last year, whatever. So, but I'm very excited about that one. And my website, jenniferdibel.com, is kind of the one-stop shop to find all of my links to my social media. They can sign up for my newsletter there. I send it out about once a month. Sometimes it's less frequently than that. And they get the title reveals, cover reveals first. I put in there what I'm reading, books I'm excited about, all that kind of good stuff. And on social media, I'm most active on Twitter for sure, but I also do have a author Facebook page that I hang out at quite frequently.
Awesome. And Jen?
Okay, well, so I just finished up the Bleecker Street Inquiry Agency. And as I told everyone, about had a nervous breakdown with that last book. So I normally release 2 books a year, but for my next series, I asked to take a little bit of a break. So it's going to be the Matchmaker series. I have turned in book 1. I turned it in 2.5 months early because, well, turns out if you take the pressure off the Jen person, I can actually write again. So I don't have an official title for that one. I will, of course, be announcing it as soon as they tell me what it is, because I like to have something to put on social media, because I'm just not that interesting. And then I'm writing the second book right now. The first book in the Matchmaker series is Miss Gwendolyn Brindley, and she is well, there's kind of a mystery behind her too, but she accepts a temporary paid companion position to go to Newport. Well, she gets to Newport and her new employer, and there's a reason it's temporary, but I'm not going to get into that, but her new employer breaks her leg during a 3-legged race. Well, it turns out that woman secretly is one of the best matchmakers, that all these society people go through. So all of a sudden, Gwendolyn goes from being a paid companion to now she's an assistant matchmaker. And so she has to interview all these gentlemen, and find out what they want in a woman. Well, what happens is there's one specific gentleman in this kind of, she's not very good at what she's doing right at first because she's never been an assistant matchmaker before. And she kind of messes things up for him because he's on the marriage mart. He's looking for, his wife died 5 years ago. He's got these 3 unruly children. And so Gwendolyn kind of messes things up for him. So he goes to her employer and says, well, you have to sponsor me. And now that didn't happen because gentlemen never got matchmakers. And so so now she has to find him a match. And that's the first book for that. So it's actually quite fun. I was so excited to get my writing groove back. And I'm way excited that I have no daunting deadlines because I haven't killed anybody off. It's either that first book or the second book that I'm writing. So I'm doing well. Where can you find me? JenToronto.com is my website. I do a lot of interaction with my Jen Toronto author Facebook page. And about a year ago, I got on Instagram, and I'm kind of understanding that. I do apologize if you happen to have sent me a message, anyone out there, and I didn't respond. I just found that button the other day that shows you where some other messages are. So, but I would appreciate some follow, some tone. I am getting the hang of it. So find me over there. And thanks everyone for coming out and listening to us chat tonight.
I agree, and let me echo Jen that it was so much fun having all four of you here, hearing about your new books and the ones that are coming, even ones that were even backlist for you. Thank you for all of that, the interesting stuff you had to say. Keep writing. We are enjoying them thoroughly. So, and everybody that had joined us tonight, thank you for joining us. Thank you for the great questions. Something I happen to think of, this will be on Baker's Facebook page tomorrow. And if your question did not get asked, please feel free to put it in the comments. The authors will drift over there and answer your questions there. So it's a good way to get some of those answered that I just kind of ran out of time for. So sorry about that. But that's a good problem. So thank you again for joining us all. And you guys all have a lovely night. Bye now.
Thank you.